Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode here at Go Rails. Today we're going to be looking at deploying Rails applications with Render. Alright, so the first things first, we want to make sure that we have an account on Render. So go ahead, pause the video. If you do not have an account for Render, go ahead and sign up. Make sure you can log into your account and then unpause the video and we'll carry it forward here. So once we have an account on Render, we're going to open up our terminal. And then we're going to say, let's create a new Rails app here. So we'll say Rails new, render deploy. And then let's go ahead and specify that we want Postgres as our database. So we'll say database equals PostgreSQL. And then I'm also going to, for our JavaScript bundler, specify that I want to use ESBuild here. So I'm going to go ahead and generate this Rails application. We can watch the nice output go flying by here. And then once this is done, we'll CD into that directory that's created for our new application. And then we'll begin the process of getting our application set up for deployment on Render. All right, so now that that's done, let's go ahead, like we said, and navigate into that new directory for our new Rails application. I'm going to go ahead and clear my terminal output here just so we have a clean slate. And so now we want to start getting things set up to deploy to Render. All right, so the first thing we need to do is modify our database.yaml file. So I'm going to open up my editor here. I'm going to look for database.yml. And down at the bottom here, what we want to do is inside of our production environment, we want to specify that the URL that we want to use to connect to our database, we want it to look inside of the database URL environment variable. So if we see it or look above up here on line 9, you can see there's kind of a reference to that here. I'm going to copy this line real quick and go back down here and paste that in. And I'm going to get rid of all of this here. And then I want to just modify what's in quotes right here. So I want to just get rid of this my app part and just specify to look inside the database URL environment variable for this. So I'm just going to remove this stuff here and then just set that like that. All right, so the next step here is to open up our puma.rb file. So I'll open that up. Now in this file, there's a section here for web concurrency, for a web concurrency environment variable. So I'm just going to search for that real quick, web concurrency. And this line we want to go ahead and uncomment. I'm also going to pop over here and change this to 4 for the number of workers. So what will happen is it'll try and fetch this key out of our env, out of the environment, and if it's not there, then it'll just return 4 as the number. If we have this environment variable set, then whatever number we have it set as there is is the number of workers that we will run right here. The next thing that we want to do is we want to uncomment this preload app line, and you can read a little bit more about this in the comments above here. In addition to this stuff, if you want to know more about the workers method here and the preload app method, you can pop over to the Puma repo on GitHub and just search for web concurrency in the README, and you'll find this section under clustered mode. And I'll be sure to include a link to this page in the notes for this episode here. But you can read more about what is going on with the number of workers and what the preload app does by reading this section here on the README. All right, so the next step is to open up our config environment production.rb file and go down to this line here. And in addition to checking this environment variable, we also want to say to check for the render environment variable and then check if that is present, which it always will be on render. All right, so the next step is to create a build script inside of our bin directory that render will use every time we push code and we go to deploy our app. That will run bundle install, precompile assets, and run any migrations that may need to be run. So the first step here is let's create our script that we need. So we want to put this inside of our bin directory, and we also want to call it render-build.sh. So we'll go ahead and create that file, and then if you go on to Render's site, they have an example build script. So I'm gonna go ahead and just copy that code, and I'm going to paste it in. I'll also be sure to drop a link to that example build script if you want to copy it and use it in your application. And I'm also going to quickly change these calls to rake to Rails. Rake will also work. I just am used to saying Rails, so I'm just going to swap that there, and I'm going to go ahead and save this file. But we can see, the steps that this script will take when going to deploy our application. It will run bundle install, assets precompile, assets clean, and then run any migrations that may need to be run. And quickly, I almost forgot one important step here. This script file, we want to make sure that this script is executable so that it can actually be run when we want to go to deploy our app. So I'm just going to open up a new terminal tab right here real quick, and then just paste in this call right here. And so all we're doing right here is just saying, hey, we want to change this bin render-build.sh file. We want to change the permissions on that to make sure that it's executable. So I'll go ahead and hit enter there, and that will now make this file executable. All right, so at this point, we're getting close to being able to deploy to render, and we have a little bit of a decision to make. There's two ways to set up or configure our application to work with render now. Render has some manual deploy options where you can go into your dashboard and kind of configure a bunch of things. Alternatively, you can create a render.yaml file at the root of your application and set up a lot of that configuration there. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do the render.yaml approach. So the first thing is we want to just make a render.yaml file, and that's going to live at the root of our application. And then we can start adding in the code to set this up. So the first thing I'm going to say is we're going to make a databases key here, and then we want to say the name for this is going to be Postgres, and then we want to say IP allow list. And then let's just point that to an empty array there. Next, we want to start declaring our services. So we are going to say services, and then we'll do type here, and then we want this to be our web service, and then we want to give it a name. We will say Rails, and then env, we will say Ruby. Okay, and then now we want to set up our build command. And we're going to point this to our build script file that we created just a moment ago. So we're going to say /bin/render-build.sh, close that off. Next, we want to say what our start command is. So say start command, and let's say bundle exec rails s. And then now we want to set up some environment variables here. So we'll say envars, and then key, and then let's say Rails master key. Oops. And then we want to say, after that, we want to say sync false. Next, we want to set up our key for our database URL. So we'll say key database URL from database, and then we want to say the name is Postgres, and then property, we want to say connection string. Okay, let's actually go ahead and declare one more thing. So let's say type here Redis for another service. We're going to say name is Redis, IP allow list. Again, we'll point that to an empty array. The plan here, let's set that to the free plan so that we don't get charged there. And then we'll say max memory policy, and we want to say no eviction. And let's go ahead and save that. And now let's go ahead and move on to the next step. All right, so at the moment we should be set up well and ready to try to get this code deployed to render and have our site go live. I say site go live, but really we don't really have an application. We haven't written any code other than setting up the configuration here. And there's kind of a reason why I did this approach. I don't remember where I read this before, but when it comes to deploying applications, it can be, fairly complex. And when starting a new side project, I often try to, if I know I'm going to try and deploy it, I often try to make that one of the first things I do. And the reason is because at the beginning of a project, when you just run that Rails new command and you generate all the scaffold for your application, that's the simplest point in which in your application's lifespan in which to try and deploy in. So really, like if we were to write some code and trying to deploy, something that we could have written could be throwing an error and causing our application to fail on build or deploy or something like that. So really, doing the deployment first before anything else really makes it as simple of a process as it can be, because we don't have any other code interfering right now other than the original scaffolding and then the few things that we've changed. So we know that at this moment, if the deployment fails, it has something to do with these 3 or 4 files that we've touched. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and commit the changes that we have made, make a new GitHub repository, and then start to finish out the process of deploying this thing live with render. So I'm going to get started over here. I'm going to open up a new terminal tab. Let's do a quick git status. Let's just initial commit this. Initial commit plus maybe render setup. I don't know, something like that. Let's just go ahead and commit all of that stuff. And then, all right, so let's make a new repository. We'll call this render deploy. I believe that's the name that we gave the app, render deploy. Yep. And then let's just say a Rails application for learning how to deploy with render. Okay, we'll make that public and go with that, and let's just go ahead and create that repository. I have committed all my local changes already, so that's an existing repository. So we're going to copy this, pop back over to our terminal, paste all of that in, and then back over here. Let's refresh, and cool, there's our new repository. So now let's connect this with render. All right, so back over in render, in your dashboard, you want to click the blueprints tab at the top, and then we want to say new blueprint instance. So from here, you can search repositories for the one that you want to connect render with. So ours is called render deploy. So it shows up right there, and we can hit the connect button. Before I hit the connect button, if you do not see the repository showing up here, what you probably need to do, and if this is your first time using render, you'll probably need to do this. You can visit this URL right here. When you click into that or visit that URL, you'll see like all of the organizations that you're part of and your personal account. So you can, from this list, select what organization, like what the location is that you want to install render. So you can click any of these organizations that you're a part of, really whichever one has the repository that you want to install render with. That's the one you'll want to find. Now, when you go inside of here, you can pick just that one repository, or you can choose to grant render access to all of the repositories in that organization. I just did just the one, the render deploy repository that we just created, but you can feel free to choose all or just one or a few, whatever repositories you would like to do for render. And then once you've done that, you can come back here and then search for your repository again. You should see it. So we'll go ahead and hit connect. All right, so creating new services. So let's see here. We're deploying from a render.yaml file for GoRails screen. So this is our repository that we just pushed up, and it is finding our render.yaml. So this is good. Let's see. Let's add a new unique name here. Let's do render deploy. Perfect. Set the branch. And then let's see. It says this blueprint will create 2 paid services. We can just go with this right now. We can quickly change it after we get past this point. Let's see. And let's see. It wants us to create or insert our Rails master key. So let's go ahead and grab that now. And now let's go ahead and say apply. All right, now after we put in our master key, if we pop back over to the dashboard tab, we can see that we have a deploy in progress. This is the new web service that we started, which is our application, the render deploy application that we pushed up to GitHub. So this is it right here now running off on render. So it's now trying to deploy our application to the live web. So let's just hang out for a minute and see if this goes through. All right, so now we can see that our deploy failed. Let's click into here and see what happened. So deploy, and then let's look at our logs here. Yes, okay, of course. So let's go ahead and grab this little line of code right here and go back into our terminal and run that. Okay, great. Get status, perfect. Let's look at the diff on that. Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead now and commit this. Let's see, add platform. Cool. Let's push. Okay, and now let's pop back over to render and go to our dashboard here. And cool, now we can see since we've pushed to GitHub, a new deploy gets kicked off automatically now, which is kind of nice for us here. So let's go ahead and see if this one goes through this time. All right, so this time around we can see that our deploy succeeded. We can click into here, we can kind of check this out if we want. We can see some logs here in a second when they load. But yeah, so that application has successfully deployed. We can see here, so we're using 4 workers. If you remember way back, we set that up in the puma.rb file. So we didn't have that other environment variable set, so I fell back to our 4 here, I believe. Now, if we try to go visit our live application, we will see an error because we don't have any pages set up, for the root for our application to go to on the root. So let's take care of that next. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is just make a new controller. I'm just going to call it the home controller. We can give it an index action. Let's go ahead and run that. And then let's pop back over here and go to home controller index. Good. Let's open up our routes file actually and make sure that we set that to root. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to root. And then let's see, we got to change this slash here to, oops, not to an R, to a hash, slash to hash. Let's go ahead and save that. And then let's open up our, let's go to our home index template there. So let's do, home index. All right, so there's that. Let's just change this to say, hello, I'm on render. Cool. All right, so let's save that. And then let's go ahead and just test this out real quick. Let's fire up our server. And then if we pop back over here, let's go ahead and create the database. Forgot to do that. Cool. Okay, that works. For our purposes, that's just fine. Let's do a quick get status here. Cool, let's add everything, and let's just say root. Go ahead and push that. Okay, and then this should kick off a new deploy for us. If we go back over to render, we should see, great, deploy in progress. Let's pause here for a second and come back after this deploy has gone off successfully. All right, So we are back. Our latest commit has deployed successfully, or so it says. Let's click into here and let's give it a try. Let's go ahead and try and visit our site. And there we are. We have done it. So we have successfully deployed an application to render. Before we close this out, let's do one thing to make sure that we're not paying a bunch of money for services. So inside your dashboard, I'll go back to the beginning of the dashboard. So if you go to your web service, and then we come down into settings here, there's the change plan button. It defaulted to the starter plan, which is $7 a month. There is a free plan for your web services. So we can go ahead and change to that right now. Let's go ahead and change that. So that should update here in a little bit. The one thing that I will say, if we go back to our main dashboard for our Postgres database, if we scroll down here, let's see, where is it? Did I miss it? Oh, right here. So update plan. We are on the cheapest plan that they offer. So at $7 a month, we can't get any cheaper than this. There is no free plan for a database. So yeah, that's something to be aware of when you're doing this with render. As far as the web service goes, though, I think what we could have done in the beginning is back in our render.yaml file. Actually, let me pull it back up here. Render.yaml, if we go down here, we probably should have done plan free here, like we did on line 15 right here. That was my mistake. We cannot do that for the database service. As we just saw, there is no free plan. So let's actually go ahead and give this a try and make sure that that works as well. So let's do a quick get status. Perfect. The diff should just be that addition there. And then let's say make web service use free plan. Cool. Let's go ahead and push that, and then let's let that deploy over on render as well. All right, so a couple things that I've discovered here since pushing that update to our render.yaml file. First things first, before pushing that update, going to your settings and changing your plan. That when you go to change your plan and then you click change plan, it prompts you with a little message that says changing your plan will only take effect if the next deploy is successful. So what happens is when you click to change your plan right here, it kicks off a new deploy, and if that deploy is successful, it will then shift you to the plan, whatever change in plan you've selected. So that does work. However, the render.yaml file, the blueprints feature here is connected to that file. So when I made the change to the render.yaml file, what I ended up having to do was deleting the old blueprint and creating a new one based off of that new render YAML file, and that's what we see deploying right here. But if we go to our dashboard and we look at our new web service, we can see that indeed we are now on the free plan. The downside to being on the free plan with your web service is that the builds take a lot longer than a paid plan. All right, so now that our web service has had some time to go ahead and build our application, we can see here now that the application says it has been deployed successfully. If we click into this and then we click on the link to check out our application, we can see here that indeed our application is up and functioning, and we have successfully deployed to render yet again, and this time on the free plan. So this is great news. So anyways, that's how you can get your Ruby on Rails applications deployed with render. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you found some value in it. Just be mindful of the points that we touched about throughout the end of this episode here. And yeah, go give it a try yourself if you want to. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. See ya.